Hi, I'm Daniel Lucas, and welcome to Book 101 Review. Book 101 is all about the books that I read for the last 40 years. And today I have my special guest. He is graphic designer, book designer, and of course, publishing consultant. No other than Mr. Michael Pietrobon. Well,
Hey, Daniel,
welcome.
thank you for having me.
Welcome. Yes.
You said I'm a book designer. I'm an editor based in Toronto, Canada, and within the last year, started Folio, a self-publishing consulting agency, and I help authors from everything with everything that it takes to take a manuscript from manuscript to market. So that includes editing, cover design, typesetting, ebook, distribution, print, you name it. I can most likely help with it.
Mr. Michael Petrobon, thank you so much for sharing your talents to the world. So, what are the key responsibilities of a book designer and a self publishing consultant?
So there are various elements that are the same across the board with every project, but a few elements that are unique to each author and the project. Um, in general, we start with cover design, and we come up with a few different versions based on text or excerpts that are shared by the author that may be relevant to the design. And after that, we move into typesetting and we try to make everything a cohesive design language. So the way we design the cover informs how we design the interiors, how we design the ebook, how we design marketing materials, and how we approach the marketing process as well. So all of that is informed by the cover design, which is like the leader in the whole process, and that's why we start with it.
Definitely. What are your struggles for book designing and as well as a self publishing consultant?
Struggles. I mean, every new project brings its own kind of struggles in a sense. Nothing that can't be overcome, of course, but that first little glimpse into the book. You have lots of ideas, but it's kind of difficult to put them together, to piece them together in a way that will be engaging for potential readers, right? And we do a lot of market research and see what other books in that genre or covering the same sort of topics also discuss, um, and, um, and we see what they're doing and see what we can do better, how we can stand out from that, but also play into that because for certain genres, people will have certain expectations, right? Like fantasy it looks a certain way, mystery novels look a certain way generally. So we want potential readers to be familiar, but also to be intrigued by something new, right? So that's a challenge. It's a fine line that we're walking there.
So, Mr. Michael, how do you differentiate between book design and general graphic design?
I mean, of course, there's a lot of overlap, especially in the tools that we use, all the Adobe suite and where we get our stock imagery and all that. But the major difference is that, or a major distinction is that we're designing specifically for a book. So we have to have certain procedures in mind. Now, the cover is one thing, designing for print. I've got that book in print right here. It's the dimensions, having the correct spine width, all these little technical details, space for the barcode, all these things. But it's when you go into the inside that, in my opinion, the more interesting work happens. And that's typesetting in such a way that is engaging to the reader, keeps them wanting to read, and is not overwhelming. I'm sure you've picked up
Yes.
many books that you open them up and they're just a wall of text, and you don't feel compelled, you don't feel invited, you don't feel welcome to continue reading. So the way I always put it is that a good cover design is what turns a passerby into a customer of your book, but good typesetting is what turns a customer into an avid reader and a fan, right?
Certainly. So, what is or how important is branding book design and self publishing consultant?
I mean, I think it's absolutely essential to success in the self-publishing industry, in the book industry in general. I mean, what we do is aim to assist authors with in a way that will allow them to compete with traditionally published books, right? While still retaining complete control over the process, both creative and otherwise, right? They when people work with us, they have 100% rights over their book, um, and yeah, so it's the best way to compete with uh, traditionally published books, which many authors try to do a lot of this stuff themselves, like the cover design, interior typesetting, and sometimes they can do a decent job. Unfortunately, I've seen far too many books where they could have used the assistance of a professional designer.
Certainly. So, what are the common mistakes self published authors make in book design?
You know, it's difficult to find one thing in particular, but one thing that seems to be overarching among book covers, for example, that authors design themselves that maybe are not the greatest, is they kind of have an older sense of style, like something they're putting together something that looks a little dated. In 2025, that might look like gradients and weird things like that, out of place, incorrect typefaces, modifying the typefaces in a way that's doesn't complement the imagery at all. There are a number of factors. Luckily, at least if you're uploading a book to Amazon, for example, for print on demand, they'll correct a lot of the technical issues, like ensure your spine width is correct and all that. So it's hard to make a mistake there. But you know, generally, like I said, many authors would benefit from having a professional designer look at their work.
Certainly. Totally agree, Mr. Michael. So, let's talk about the technical aspects of book design. What software and tools are essential for professional book design?
I mean, I do practically everything within Adobe InDesign. And then, of course, imagery, I'm using Adobe Photoshop, a little bit of Adobe Illustrator. But the book really comes together in Adobe InDesign, right? And I'd say if anyone has the full Adobe suite of those three programs, at least InDesign, Illustrator, and Photoshop, they're set and they can do anything. Of course, you have to have the technical know-how, and that's where a trained professional comes in. But yeah, that's really all the software you need, I would say.
Certainly. So, how do you ensure a book's layout is visually appealing and readable?
Well, I mean, at this point, I don't need to do as much testing because I've been designing books for so long. I know what something's going to look like when it's ultimately in print. But a few guiding principles I use that are being generous with the margins. Um, you don't want to be too generous, but you almost can't. Like if you leave nice generous margins, a little bit of white space, breathing room for the reader, that's always something that's refreshing on a new spread. If you're looking for typefaces, I'd say like we tend to stay more traditional and use serif fonts like Garamond, Baskerville, Bodoni, things like that. Um, and yeah, I'd say that typesetting is not the place for crazy experimentation. You can do that kind of thing on the cover, but on the inside, if you want people to read the book, you kind of have to give them something familiar and something that they can work with.
Very well said, Mr. Michael. Very well said. So, what are the key differences between designing an ebook and a print book?
Well, by and large, when you're designing a print book, it's a static file that you're designing, right? So the the, the document is going to look like this no matter what, no matter where it's printed, right? The ebook is reflowable, which means that it adapts to the user's settings. So if someone wants to change the typeface, change the background color, change the leading, which is the space between the lines, change the size of the font, anything that they want to change, they can. So we have to make a fairly robust ebook file um, that will accommodate those changes, right? So it's far more flexible. So yeah, that's a major difference. Although when we're doing ebooks, we do try to make the design informed by the print, right? So we try to make it as similar as possible, whether it's the way we've spaced out chapter openings or um, the fonts that we're using, whatever it is, we try to emulate the print design as much.
So, what are the industry standards for book cover dimensions and formatting?
Uh, I mean, there are a few common sizes like half letter, 5.5 by 8.5. There's 6 by 9 is a very common size. Most books I do are about 6 by 9. And then there's 5 by 8, 8 by 10. These are all typical sizes, but luckily, whether you're working with a custom printer like me or if you're using Amazon KDP, you can choose custom sizes. You can make a book that's wider than it is tall. You can do whatever you like in general.
Certainly. So, let's talk about the self publishing process and consulting. How do you guide authors in choosing between self publishing and traditional publishing?
Well, I mean, I'm going to be a little biased towards self-publishing, not just because it's the service that I sell, but I think there are great benefits to it. Among them being that authors retain 100% control and 100% royalties of their book. Um, Now, that being said, there are cases where I'd say for books of like literary fiction, things like that, that don't fit into a specific genre, it may be more appropriate for an author to go traditional. But if you're publishing a memoir, if you're publishing fantasy, sci-fi, that type of book, generally you do better with self-publishing.
Certainly. So, how can a consultant help authors navigate ISBNs or copyrights and legal requirements?
Yeah, so the legislation there, whatever country you're in, is usually fairly straightforward. Where I am in Canada, we get ISBNs for free. So Canadian citizens don't have to pay for ISBNs. They can get an unlimited amount of ISBNs for any book that they want to publish. An important thing to know is that um, every different edition of a book should have an ISBN. So whether it's if it's the same book, but it's the ebook version or the print version or the hardcover edition, or if you make any changes and come out with a new edition, they all need their own ISBN. Um, Another thing to note is I would highly recommend that any self-publishing author putting out a book does not use Amazon's free ISBN, because then you're kind of stuck with Amazon. So even if you live in a country like the US where you have to pay for ISBNs, you're better off doing that. And then you own the ISBN, you own the book, and you don't have any kind of exclusivity with Amazon.
Certainly. So, what are the major self publishing platforms and how do they compare?
I'd say Amazon is the big one, right? Amazon KDP. That system is great for authors looking to get uh, their book in the market as quickly and as easily as possible. And the Amazon name has a lot of cachet behind it, so people don't have any issue usually trusting a purchase from Amazon. They know they're going to get the book if if they purchased it from there. So that's a great option. It also allows authors to get very inexpensive copies for themselves. All right, in Canada, usually around $5-6 a book on Amazon KDP. Beyond that, there's Ingram Spark. They have a few more options available if you want like a nice hardcover book with a dust jacket. And most independent bookstores, like brick and mortar bookstores, they're like more eager to buy books from Ingram Spark than they are from Amazon. They usually don't like dealing with Amazon, but they'll purchase books from Ingram Spark, and that's usually the best way to get your book into physical bookstores as well. So those are the two major ones.
Yes, KDP and what's the other
Ingram
one?
Spark.
Ingram Spark.
Yeah.
So, Mr. Michael, what will be your advice for those people out there who want to publish their first stories, memoir, or any kind of books?
I would say get acquainted with the process, the publishing process, and every service provider, every method of publishing, whether it's traditional or self-publishing, is going to have a different route to the end product. Um, but there are certain things that are always the same. There's always going to be editing. There's always going to be typesetting. There's always going to be cover design, and there should always be ebook design. Right? It's easy to do. It costs nothing to host it, so you may as well just add that to your repertoire. Get acquainted with the process, and even if you find that it's too difficult to manage on your own, um, you should know what the different stages are. And then ultimately, my advice, of course, would be to reach out to a professional like myself. But if you're willing and able to do it on your own, more power to you. And there are a lot of great resources out there. I mean, even with free software, you might be able to put a book together using Canva or something like that. So, yeah, just get acquainted with the process would be my advice.
Thank you for your advice, Mr. Michael. And what would be your short-term and long-term goals as a publishing consultant, as well as an book designer, or other profession that you are doing?
Well, I mean, I want to help as many people as I can publish their book and bring their visions to reality, as it were. Um, so, finding different ways to reach out to these people recently has been doing podcasts like this, but um, advertising in different ways and letting people know that they can truly benefit from a self-publishing service and probably do better with the revenue of their books, right? If something's professionally designed and put together in a very appealing manner, I think they have a better chance of success. So I'd like
Certainly.
to help more and more people do that.
Certainly. So, Mr. Michael, let's talk about marketing and business strategy. How do you help authors create strong book marketing plan?
So what we've started doing fairly recently is giving authors a sort of package of pitch letters and templates, and then we'll work with them on creating these. So it's reaching out to bloggers, book reviewers, librarians for events, even schools if it's like a children's book. So we've been supplying things like that. Beyond that, we've also helped authors with like Google Ads campaigns and Meta Ads campaigns to promote their book. Now, this sort of thing works better again if the book falls into a specific genre category, like science fiction, romance, whatever it is. Not as good for literary fiction, but we've had a good amount of success with these pay-per-click campaigns, as they're called. And then beyond that, it depends on what the author wants to do. Like sometimes it's helpful just to get some initial reviews, some endorsements of the book that can then be included on the Amazon listing, and then people will be more engaged and intrigued and ready to buy. So it's different for every book. Not every marketing practice fits every book, but in general, like reaching out to other professionals in the industry, whether they're reviewers or things like that, certainly helps. So we help authors do that.
Certainly. So, what role does book design play in an author's branding and promotion?
Well, like I said earlier, it's the first thing we do is the cover design. We get that down, and that informs all of the design that we do afterwards. So the interiors, the all the marketing efforts, um, and it's not just because we're using the cover in the marketing efforts. It's a cohesive style that is recognizable as being part of this book.
Yes. So, what are the biggest challenges in running a book design and self publishing consulting business?
I've been very lucky with the authors that work with me. They're great people and they're very easygoing. But sometimes there can be challenges in managing expectations, right? And usually that has to do with timeline, right? It's not very mechanical work that we can just accurately predict how long it's going to take. Um, sometimes we have to wait for inspiration to strike, or work towards that inspiration, and then put something together. So managing timelines is something that I could foresee being a challenge on future projects, but it's not uh, nothing we can't manage. Yeah, like I said, lots of great authors I've worked with, and they've been a delight. So can't complain.
That'd be awesome, Mr. Michael. So before we wrap up our discussion for today, I'm inviting you to please do listen to my other podcast, Food 101, in its fifth season, People Fifth Season, with Chef Alessandro, one of his specialty chef in one of the five-star hotel in downtown Toronto. So please do listen to our latest episode. We are talking about, or we are reading our letter senders all over the world. So please do listen, Food 101, wherever you're listening, your podcast. So what advice would you give to someone starting their own book to
Someone,
design and self-publishing as a consultancy?
you mean someone just starting the writing process?
Yes.
I mean, I'm not sure that I'm the person to ask for writing advice, because the way I write is very chaotic, and I wouldn't wish that on anyone, to be honest. But I
How about
mean,
for the design?
for
The
design,
David design, yes.
I think I'm pretty sure every author, when they get to a certain point in the writing process, starts to think of what they'd like to see on their book cover. Whether that actually works or not is a different matter. But um, I I would say, like, let let those thoughts come, and explore them, and write them down, and write down all your ideas. And if you're working with any professional designer, they'd love to have that insight into your mind and what your thinking was throughout the writing process, and hopefully produce something that matches that, and falls in line. So, um, yeah, start thinking about design early on, and also consider your typesetter. And I get a lot of documents that have a lot of unnecessary spaces and line breaks and strange things like that. While you're writing, try to clean those up, because we do our best, but these things can pass through into the printed book. Ultimately, we can miss things, and it's better to have the document as clean as possible before you submit it for typesetting.
Mr. Michael Pietrobon, thank you so much for sharing your talents to the world. So can you please invite our listeners to support your business?
Yep. So I can be found at folioprint.com, and there's a silent G in there. FOGLIOPRINT.com. And just reach out to me. You can fill out the contact form or give me a call, and I'd be happy to chat about your book.
Yes, people, let's support Mr. Michael, because if you support him, more, and more empowering design to come. So, Mr. Michael, thank you for your time.
Thank you, Daniel.
More to come, people. See you soon. So, Mr. Michael, if you have